I died on a Wednesday. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, not in one of those dramatic, literary ways people use when a relationship ends or a dream falls apart. I mean, my heart stopped. Twice, actually. The machine said so. The doctor said so. The nurse said so with the kind of matter-of-fact calm that makes you realize just how ordinary catastrophe becomes to people who work around it every day. And the worst part was not the pain. It was not the fear. It was finding out, while my body was still deciding whether it intended to stay on this side of the dirt, that I was the only person in my marriage who had not gotten the memo that it was already over. Let me take you back. My name is Adrian Keller. I am 45 years old, Regional Operations Director at Hartwell Stratton Group in Raleigh, North Carolina. I drove a dark blue Volvo. I made a brisket that made neighbors suspicious and competitive. I paid my taxes early. I remembered birthdays. I was, by every measurable standard available to adults with decent credit and a respectable grill, a good man living a good life. Or so I believed. It happened on a Wednesday in November. Ben Harlow found me. Ben was my colleague, my lunch companion, the kind of man who could somehow eat barbecue chips during a budget review and then look genuinely offended when people noticed. He told me later that when he walked into my office, I was face down across my keyboard, one arm hanging off the side of the desk, and my laptop had somehow sent a blank Teams message to half the floor containing nothing but the letter K and 3 periods. 12 people replied. 2 asked if I was all right. 1 assumed it was an accidental keyboard shortcut. Ben called 911. Then he called my wife. This is where the story stops being mildly embarrassing and starts becoming something else entirely. I do not remember the ambulance. I do not remember the paramedics. What I remember is stillness. A strange, suspended underwater stillness. No panic, no sharp edges, no body, really. Just distance and pressure and the faint sense that somewhere far away, people were making urgent decisions without me. And then a woman's voice cutting through it. Strong, direct, uninterested in sentiment. Stay with me, Mr. Keller. Stay right here. That was Dr. Elena Vasquez. I remember thinking, with the sort of unearned confidence only a dying man can still have, I'm trying. When I woke up properly, I was in the ICU, tubes where tubes should never be, monitors, a plastic bracelet, dry mouth, pain behind the eyes, a nurse adjusting my IV with the casual competence of someone who had already saved 3 other people before breakfast. Her name was Marisol. She said, "Welcome back," without looking up, the same way someone might say your table is ready. I croaked, "How long?" She checked the chart. 3 days. I blinked at her. 3? You coded twice, she said, now looking at me. Doctor. Vasquez got you back both times, so try not to make a hobby of it. I looked around the room. Flowers from the office on the windowsill. A card signed by half the operations team. A ridiculous balloon from Ben with a cartoon smoker grill on it because he knew me well enough to know I would hate it and therefore appreciate it. A chair beside the bed. Empty. I swallowed. My wife? Marisol's face changed by maybe half an inch. That was all. A small, careful movement professional people make when the truth is about to disappoint somebody who cannot afford one more disappointment. She called this morning, she said. To check on you. Called. Not visited. Called. I stared at her. She called. Marisol straightened a blanket that did not need straightening. I'll let Dr. Vasquez know you're awake. That was the first crack. Small. Quiet. Easy to miss if you wanted to. A hairline fracture in a wall you had lived inside for 11 years and never once questioned. Doctor. Vasquez came in 30 minutes later with a clipboard, composed expression, and the kind of authority that makes grown men sit up straighter even when they have been dead for parts of the week. She explained what had happened. Major cardiac event, arterial blockage, emergency intervention, monitoring, rest, No stress, absolutely no travel. At least 2 weeks of recovery before I even pretended to be a functional person. Then she glanced at the chart and said carefully, "Your wife mentioned there was a trip planned." I felt something cold move through me. "Napa," I said. "In 4 days." She nodded. "You will not be going." I figured that. "What concerns me more," she said, "is that you should not be alone." I almost smiled at that. It felt like the sort of thing a doctor says to make you feel gently supervised by the universe. "I'll call her," I said. "She'll come." Dr. Vasquez looked at me for a second too long. I did not understand that look then. I would later. It was pity. Ben visited that night with deli soup I could not eat and the energy of a man trying very hard to seem normal in a room built for emergencies. He sat down, took one look at the hospital tray, and said, "I am about to save your life a third time." I laughed. First real laugh since waking up. We talked about work, budgets, office gossip. The time he blamed the sound of chewing chips during a video call on audio lag, which remains one of the most pathetic lies I have ever heard from a grown man. Then, without warning, his face changed. "Has Fiona been in?" he asked. My wife's name was Fiona. "No," I said. "She's sorting some things out. She called." Ben nodded slowly. That nod. The one people use when they have already traveled farther into the truth than you have and do not know whether to drag you after them. "Ben," I said, "what aren't you telling me?" He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. "Nothing you need right now." That is not an answer. He looked at the floor. "Get stronger first," he said quietly. "That's all I'm asking." He was a terrible liar. Always had been. He once tried to keep a surprise retirement lunch secret for our CFO and accidentally told the man about it 2 days early because, in his words, the secret was making my shoulders hurt. He was carrying something now. I let him. I was tired, weak, and if I am honest, I did not yet want the answer. Fiona called that night. Her voice was warm, concerned, correctly textured. If you had heard only the sound and none of the content, you would have said there went a devoted wife speaking to a man who had nearly died. "Baby," she said, "I have been so scared. How are you feeling?" I coded twice. A pause. "I know. I was dead, Fiona." "I know, Adrian. Don't say it like that." "How should I say it?" Her voice changed slightly, not colder, tighter. "I just mean, you're stable now. You're okay. You're being monitored. You're not here." Silence. Then, "The trip is in 4 days." There it was. No preparation, no cushioning, just the actual priority set plainly between us. "The flights are non-refundable," she said. "Everything's been booked for months." I said her name the way you say it when you need another person to understand that the conversation has arrived somewhere serious. "Fiona, it's only 4 days," she said quickly. "Dr. Vasquez said you're stable. You have nurses. You have cardiac monitoring. You're not home alone. I want my wife here, and I will be there when I get back." It was so clean, so efficient. The logic of someone who had already made peace with her own choice and now needed only for me to do the administrative work of accepting it. "Who are you going with?" I asked. Short pause. "Naomi and the girls." Of course. Naomi and the girls. For 2 years, Naomi and the girls had been the answer to everything I could not quite account for. Late dinners, overnight spa weekends, Saturdays that stretched too long, Tuesdays that vanished. Naomi and the girls had become the all-purpose wallpaper in our marriage. I had stopped pressing against it because I did not especially want to know what was holding it up. "Okay," I said. She seemed surprised by how quickly I gave it to her. "Okay? Have a nice trip." I hung up, stared at the ceiling, and felt something settle low and quiet inside me. Not anger, not even heartbreak, Not yet. Something cleaner. Clarity. They flew out Saturday morning. I know because Ben told me by accident when he came by with coffee and mentioned airport traffic had been miserable. I know because Marisol asked later that day whether my family was coming by that weekend and then, upon seeing my face, gently pretended she had meant anyone at all. And I know because I called the house twice on Saturday evening and once Sunday morning and no one answered. 5 days. That is how long I lay in that hospital room while my body recovered and something else in me rearranged itself completely. By the time I came home, I was softer on the outside, quieter. I smiled more, asked nurses how their shifts were going, thanked people sincerely, sat still longer. But beneath all of that, underneath the politeness and recovery and all the neatly folded discharge papers, the clarity had gone to work. They came home Sunday afternoon. I know the exact image because it branded itself onto me. Front door opening. Fiona walking in first, tanned and laughing, one hand dragging a suitcase behind her. And behind her, half a step back, another man. Not then. Not yet. That came later. That Sunday, she came home alone, wheeled her bag into the foyer, kissed me on the cheek and said, "There you are." As if she had left me on a sofa, not in an ICU. I smiled and said, "Welcome home." She didn't notice then that the smile stopped at the mouth. Most people never do. There is a particular kind of power in being underestimated by the person who once knew you best. She thought she knew exactly who had come home from the hospital. She was wrong by 11 years. Let me tell you what surviving death did not do. It did not make me fearless. It did not flood me with spiritual enlightenment. It did not make me eager to forgive everyone and buy linen shirts and start journaling about gratitude at sunrise. What it did was make me precise. Noise became intolerable. Performance became visible from farther away. People stopped looking like stories and started looking like patterns. And patterns, unlike vows, do not lie. The first morning after they got back, I woke before Fiona, made coffee, stood in the kitchen, and watched the neighbor's golden retriever chase a squirrel it was never going to catch. I understood that dog perfectly. Fiona came downstairs in a silk robe, smelling faintly of expensive shampoo and whatever sunscreen rich people put on their betrayals to keep them glowing. She stopped when she saw me. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." "Coffee?" "It's there." She poured herself a mug and leaned against the island. Then she talked. For 20 minutes she talked about vineyards, sunsets, a ridiculous tasting menu, the woman-owned winery Naomi insisted on visiting, the terrible couple from Charlotte who monopolized the hotel hot tub, and a tiny breakfast place where the lemon ricotta pancakes had apparently altered her understanding of breakfast as a concept. And in 20 minutes, she mentioned Naomi exactly once. Once. The great organizing force behind the trip reduced to a passing detail. "Did Naomi like the pancakes?" I asked. Microscopic pause. "She loved them." "Good," I said. "We should have them over. You and me and Naomi and her husband." She looked at me over the mug. Her husband? What is his name again?" She smiled. "Ethan." I smiled back. "Right. Ethan. Let's do that." Neither of us meant a word of it. I went back to work 2 weeks later against Dr. Vasquez's recommendation and every nurse's better judgment. Ben met me at the elevator and looked at me like I had risen from a grave badly but impressively. Before he could launch into whatever speech he had prepared, I said, "Good morning, Ben." He exhaled. "I support you, whatever's happening with you, but I need to say this in love. You look terrible." "Thank you. I missed your bedside manner." He followed me to my office, shut the door behind him, and sat down without being invited. "How long have you known?" I asked. He closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he told me. It had started, according to him, about 8 months earlier at a corporate mixer. Fiona had come by to pick me up. I remembered the evening. She wore a dark green dress. I had been trapped in a conversation about municipal contracts and bad bourbon. Ben had seen her at the bar talking to a man from the private equity firm 2 floors above ours. His name was Elliot Crane, 42, divorced, sharp suits, perfect teeth, the kind of face that makes people assign integrity to bone structure. Ben said he noticed them because they were not talking like strangers. They were talking like people working very hard to look like strangers. Then 3 months later, he saw Fiona's car in the garage on a Saturday. I was in Asheville for a conference. Elliot's car was there too. I should have told you, Ben said. I shook my head. You are telling me now. No, Adrian. I mean when I first... I know what you mean. He watched me carefully. People had been doing that a lot since the hospital, watching my face for signs of the old me, the louder one. The man who told long stories at barbecues and argued with referees and assumed loyalty was the default setting of people who smiled often enough. That version of me was not gone. He simply no longer ran the house alone. I did not hire a private investigator. I did not go through her phone. I did not follow her car or place a recorder under the bed or confront anyone in a parking structure like a man who mistakes humiliation for drama. I paid attention. That was enough. Elliot Crane worked late Tuesdays and Thursdays. That information took 6 minutes to verify. Fiona had started Pilates on Tuesdays and Thursdays 7 months earlier. My wife had never done Pilates in her life. She considered walking from the car into Target a form of bodywork. Her phone, which used to charge on the nightstand, now charged in the bathroom. She laughed differently on certain calls. She started wearing a new perfume without mentioning it. She became tender in the way guilty people become tender. More attentive, more thoughtful, more likely to ask if I had taken my medication. Guilt, if you are not looking closely, often passes for renewed love. I was looking closely. I called Lawrence Dean, my attorney. 10 years with him. Gray suits, dry voice, precise mind, bills that hurt, and advice that justified them. I sat across from him in his office on a Wednesday afternoon and said, hypothetically, if a man wanted to quietly restructure his assets before a significant personal change, what would that involve? He looked at me for a long moment. How significant? Marriage-ending significant. He opened a legal pad. Let's begin. What followed were the strangest weeks of my adult life. On the surface, everything remained normal. Dinner, television, shared coffee in the mornings, Fiona asking if I'd taken my statin, Fiona touching my shoulder in the kitchen with exactly the right amount of concern. Fiona becoming, in fact, more wife-like than she had been in years, as if the possibility of losing me or perhaps just losing the arrangement had sharpened her instincts. I was not miserable. That may be the part that surprises you. I cried once, in the shower. 4 days after Ben told me. 4 straight minutes, hands on tile, water too hot, grieving honestly for the marriage I thought I had been living inside. Then I shut the water off, got dressed, and made eggs. Because the man who came back from the ICU had decided something. He would not perform pain for a person who had stopped watching him honestly a long time ago. He would not beg. He would not warn. He would be ready. I spoke to Fiona's mother, too. Her name was Margaret, 72, sharp as wire. The only person in Fiona's family who had ever looked at me without qualification and said years ago, "My daughter is lucky. Do not let her forget it." Margaret had called me in the hospital. Not Fiona. Margaret. She had cried quietly for nearly half an hour and said things mothers usually know but rarely permit themselves to speak aloud. We stayed in touch after that. She did not protect her daughter from the truth of what she had become. That mattered to me. 3 days before everything ended, I changed the house alarm code. A small thing. The kind nobody notices until the moment it matters. Saturday came cold and bright. I was up at 6, showered, dressed, coffee made, eggs scrambled, Newspaper open on the table because after nearly dying, I found myself nostalgic for things that required hands and patience. Fiona came down at 8:12, fully dressed, makeup done, the exact look of a woman heading somewhere she had already rehearsed in her head. "Brunch with Naomi," she said, as if reminding me of something we had discussed casually, repeatedly, safely. I slid a plate toward her. "Eat first." She looked surprised. Since coming home, I had cooked more. She took it as a symptom of recovery. She was not wrong. She simply did not understand what kind. We ate together at the kitchen island like a married couple on a perfectly normal Saturday. At 8:57, she kissed my cheek and said she'd be home around 3. I watched her pull out of the driveway. Then I called Lawrence. "It's time," I said. He answered, "Everything is ready." Good. I finished my coffee. Here is what Fiona did not know. She did not know that in the 6 weeks since my release, Lawrence had quietly and legally moved the majority of our liquid assets into a private trust structure under my control, with documentation so clean it could survive a microscope and an earthquake. She did not know the joint account that once held nearly $300,000 now held enough for 2 months of bills and not much else. She did not know I had filed for divorce 11 days earlier. Lawrence advised me to wait on service until the right moment. I agreed. Let her leave on a Saturday. Let her feel unwatched. Then let the door close. She came home at 2:43, and she did not come home alone. The front door opened. Fiona stepped inside first, laughing over her shoulder at something still hanging in the air from outside. Then Elliot Crane walked in behind her carrying a weekend bag. A full weekend bag. Not a coat, not a laptop case. A bag packed by a man who believed the space he was entering would hold him overnight. They had not even looked toward the kitchen yet. I sat at the table with a mug in my hand and watched them arrive. Elliot saw me first. His hand froze on the bag handle. I took one slow sip of coffee. "Welcome home," I said. "Elliot, right? We've never officially met." Fiona turned. The look on her face moved through shock, calculation, fear, and something almost like annoyance before settling into a very bad attempt at dignity. "Adrian?" "Sit down," I said. Not loudly, not angrily, just clearly. I looked at Elliot. "You too." Something in my voice must have convinced him. He set the bag down and sat. I reached to the folder beside my mug and laid 2 sets of papers on the table. One in front of Fiona, one in front of Elliot. Fiona's hand trembled just slightly when she touched the first page. "Those," I said, "are divorce papers filed 11 days ago." Neither of them spoke. I kept going. "The house remains solely mine. It always was, actually. You may remember your employment situation when we bought it. Lawrence certainly did. The joint accounts have been restructured. You'll have access to enough through the next 60 days for ordinary expenses. After that, your attorney, assuming you choose a competent one, can coordinate with Lawrence regarding the settlement. You will receive what is fair, Fiona. I am not interested in spectacle." She looked up at me then, face drained, almost colorless. "You planned this?" "Yes." She blinked hard. "While you were just here, acting normal." I smiled without warmth. "I was never quite normal after the ICU," I said. "You simply were not paying close enough attention." Elliot found his voice before she did. "Maybe I should go." "You should stay," I said. "This part concerns you." He sat back down. I turned to him fully for the first time. I had built him into something much larger in my mind over those weeks. A threat, a rival, an elegant disaster in a Navy sport coat. Sitting in my kitchen, pale and caught and visibly recalculating, he looked much smaller, not harmless, just ordinary. A man who had made an ugly decision and had not expected the bill to arrive in person. "Elliot," I said, "the facilities director in our building is named Howard Marks. Good man, awful liar." In about 45 minutes, Howard will receive a formal complaint from Lawrence Dean outlining an inappropriate personal relationship between a senior partner in one tenant firm and the spouse of a senior executive in another, with potential overlap in client-facing environments and reputational risk to both companies. His face changed all at once. "Monday morning," I said. "I suggest you call HR before they call you." The blood left him so fast I almost felt scientific curiosity about it. Fiona finally spoke. "You would do that?" "No," I said. "I have done that." The tears came after the anger. That part was predictable. First indignation, then accusation, then a brief, almost comical flirtation with self-righteousness. Then, once she understood the paperwork was real and the accounts were already moved and the house was not negotiable, the crying. I believed those tears were real. Let me be precise. I do not think she was crying for me. I think she was crying for the future she assumed would remain available no matter what she did. The house, the money, the husband who grilled brisket and handled everything and always, always remained where she left him. Consequences are often mistaken for heartbreak by the people receiving them. They are not the same thing. At one point, she looked at me and said very quietly, "Who are you?" That deserved an honest answer. So I gave her one. "I'm the man who died on a Wednesday," I said, and came back unwilling to be lied to. That was the end of it. Not legally, not logistically, but in the only way that mattered. Elliot left first. He forgot the weekend bag. I did not remind him. Fiona stayed another hour. We talked more honestly in that hour than we had in the previous 3 years of marriage. She told me things. I told her things. We acknowledged, with a bluntness that would have been useful much earlier, that we had both been living beside a marriage for some time and calling it one. It was, perversely, the best conversation we ever had, and the last one we ever had as husband and wife. She left at 5:04. I watched from the kitchen window until her car disappeared around the corner. Then I called Ben. "Come over," I said. "Are you okay?" "I am magnificent," I said. "Bring food. Somewhere good. We're celebrating." He arrived 40 minutes later with brisket from the place on Wade Avenue and the expression of a man afraid hope might jinx itself if he said it too loudly. We sat at the same kitchen table, same chairs, same room where my marriage had ended and I suspect my life had finally started telling the truth. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which for Ben Harlow qualifies as sainthood. When I finished, he leaned back, stared at the ceiling, and let out a breath that sounded borrowed from a much larger animal. "Adrian," he said, "you are the most dangerous, quiet man I have ever met." I laughed. A full one. Real. Loud enough to echo a little off the cabinets. And it felt extraordinary. Like the first fully honest breath I had taken in years. The divorce finalized 4 months later. Clean, quick, thorough. Lawrence earned every dollar. Fiona received what was fair and nothing decorative. Elliot Crane, last I heard, was still navigating the aftermath of a deeply uncomfortable review process inside a company that valued discretion until it started threatening revenue. I sold the house, bought a smaller place, less square footage, less theater, fewer rooms designed to impress people who never intended to stay. Just enough space for a man, a good grill, and the absolute certainty that everyone inside had chosen to be there honestly. Doctor. Vasquez cleared me for full activity at the 6-month mark. She shook my hand at the end of the appointment and said, "You look better than almost anyone I've ever dragged back." "I feel better," I said, "than I have in years." Marisol saw me in the corridor on the way out, looked me over with that same unimpressed eye and said, "You good now, Mr. Keller?" I smiled. A real one this time. One that reached the eyes. "Marisol," I said, "I am absolutely spectacular. People say that when you die and come back, you're supposed to see a light. I did not see a light. What I saw was clarity. cold, clean, merciless clarity, about who shows up, about who doesn't, about the difference between tenderness and guilt, about the fact that survival is not always a gift until you decide what to do with it. I died on a Wednesday, and the man who came back was the best thing that ever happened to me.